thank you for those who stood up and spoke. I was not present at the last meeting that we had here, but I was watching it on YouTube, the whole thing, and can't do anything over YouTube. I can't vote and wouldn't be allowed to even if I had called in. That's not the legal way to do it. You have to be present. But we had a couple of speakers last time, and it, gets me thinking when we get to making tough decisions. I had used a phrase, I don't know, probably about 18 months ago, that I think people have wondered where it was. I used the phrase a soft landing, right, with us as a board. I thought we had the financial wherewithal to create a soft landing. My opinion on that, and let me emphasize, my opinion has not changed. But what I mean by a soft landing, I understood last time listening into those who spoke, was not something that others interpreted the same way. In the sense that spreading something out over 3 or 4 years where we use our reserves and slowly draw ourselves away from those reserves is a soft landing in my mind, but it's not soft to anybody whose lives are individually impacted, right? That's when it becomes hard and reality sets in and people go home with pits in their stomach. We are not at all unaware. I'm ecstatic with, in terms of the Board of Education having as a whole a core belief statement, which is to educate every child, a whole child, and to look at it and make, that's the framework in which we make our decisions. And so there have been questions raised tonight about whether we are thinking along those lines. And the answer is yes, right? How do we prove it to you? Well, it's hard, right? I don't know necessarily how to prove it to you. Inviting you to the workshops, and yet it's nice to, I won't deny, to have workshops with nobody watching where we can have conversations. But that's where a lot of this, the work is getting done, and the discussions and the questions being asked. The questions that we've heard are questions that have been asked by board members around this table that I've heard, right? What is being done to bring the librarians up to speed, or what curriculum will be written so we can make sure that the skills that are needed will be passed on. And maybe we haven't come up with the right answer, maybe we have, maybe we haven't had enough inputs here or there. So I'm not addressing anything specifically other than to say we haven't gone about this haphazardly, right? We have done this in a thoughtful process. One of the goals and objectives of this year, and we are getting so close, and we'll see that at next week's meeting when we adopt the strategic initiatives of a long-term plan. Basically, I call that the backbone. And then it will have to be fleshed out, and the writing will have the managerial year-by-year plan will be there, but we will have our framework in which we make decisions. This is something that the board has asked for many years, and for a variety of reasons we weren't able to get at it like we were finally this year. And it's there. The long-term plan is taking shape and gives us our roadmap so that we can maintain the culture that Fairport has. And one of the first things that was pointed out in the long-term plan was indeed our culture. But the hard part of learning about our culture is that not the hard part of this, it has strengths and it has weaknesses. And we learned a lot about our weaknesses, and I'm so glad that we invested in the U of R to be there so they could talk to us candidly where we might not have said things to ourselves when we were going through that process. What are the weaknesses that we've had? And we've had to face them. And sometimes that's ugly when we have to face our own internal weaknesses. And so that's been the case. And I can look back at my years on the board, and I will speak only for me in this case and not for the board members, and say, yeah, there were probably mistakes made. And now we're changing that. Right now, I think we're addressing that through a long-term plan, that we have a map of what needs to be done so that we can sustain the positive sides of the Fairport culture. And I see that that's going to be the case, in my opinion at least. I see that that's going to be the case, that we will sustain and we will continue to educate every child that comes to us, whether they need to be learning English, or whether they have special needs, or whether they are gifted and talented, or whether they're right in the what we call the middle, and nobody's in the middle. I think everybody's gifted and talented in their own way. But that's part of the Fairport culture, right, is once a Raider, always a Raider. And so we are addressing that, and we're getting at that. And that's what our primary goal is that we sustain and maintain what is there. And if we don't make some of these tougher decisions, then that's all in jeopardy. But we have been thoughtful about it. It hasn't been haphazard at all in the least. And At least I share that with you. And I apologize if those have asked, where's the soft landing? Well, in my mind, that's where we're still getting at, but it could have been a crash landing had we not been addressing this over the period of several years. So thank you, though, for speaking up. We have to hear that. We must. If we stop hearing from people, you wonder what's going on out there. So I'm grateful that you have had that courage to say something to us.
This is my 14th, 15th year in the district, third year as superintendent. I mourn in these losses and what it's doing to our school community, and I'm grateful that you feel comfortable coming forward and sharing and feeling comfortable to express your disappointment. Ms. Holmes, Ms. Steger, Ms. Dubois, you deserve answers, and you deserve a plan. The community deserves a plan, the staff, and most importantly, our students, as Finley accurately stated. We want to make sure that we give our students not just the best, but an exemplar model experience. And I'm confident we're going to get there. But we're right now in the throes of a budget season, and and the goal is always to try to minimize the impact. We have to fiercely defend our mission. Just as much as we celebrate our values and our cultures and that irrepressible Fairport spirit, there's a responsibility to that. And part of that responsibility is to make sure that you're making the right decisions in a thoughtful, methodical way. I believe Ms. Holmes was saying, is how did we get here? And I think that we need to continue to ask ourselves that question so we don't continue to live this every single year. We are in a phase. We are trying to find a pathway towards sustainability. And I'm feeling with our process that we've engaged in, we've let people in closer than they ever been. As far as I've been here, we will continue to have a transparent, open process with our finances and our facilities planning as we move along. And we need to fiercely defend our mission so we can continue to offer the incredible experiences to not just the students who are here today, but to those students who have yet come to our school. And that's what keeps me going, because this is hard. This is really hard, and it's something that, as a school leader, I wouldn't have envisioned for myself. But I'm here and I embrace it all. And I embrace it all because I believe in all of you. I believe in our children. I believe in the school board who has the vision. I believe in our library media specialists who do incredible things with students, to collaborate with you as we, again, reel through this budget process and, trying to make sure that we have a fiscally responsible budget to partner and to make sure that we're doing what's best for our children. That's my commitment. That's my vow. And I embrace it all. And I am also hurting with you, and I acknowledge the thoughts, feelings, and passions. Mr. DiMartino and Ms. McClare, you talked about school safety. I look forward to connecting with you like I shared, and really, having a conversation, because I do want to hear from students too. And, and to give some assurances, and maybe I will be able to learn from you, because I've, taken some notes and, getting perspective on how I could best communicate with our student body, and maybe doing some forums with students as well. So thank you for that, and thank you for coming, all of you, and for sharing and for being honest and journeying with us as we move forward. Thank you.
I'd just like to add, I wish that Finley had stayed, because I would have liked to ask her to come back and tell us what happens next year. I hope that the program will be done differently, but we will still have a program. I know that we're not saying no to computers. I know we've had to make some adjustments. I don't know how those adjustments are going to look to the students, to the participants. That's my concern, is that our programs are going to be intact. They're going to be changed, they're going to be done differently, but we're not saying no to computers. I think that might have been a misunderstanding that when we said we won't be using the same system of delivery, Brett, one of the things you have told us as a board is that our programs will remain intact, our way of delivering them will be different. And I do know that that's a challenge for our library media specialists. I know that you can do it because we know that being in the library is not just books, but you are the technology backbone of the building. And that you have capacity that people outside may not recognize. It's going to be a challenging year for many people, for many reasons. And I just want us to be sure that we, as a group, are faithful to you, the community, that the programs that our students have had, they will continue to have. They will be delivered, we hope, we know differently. We just hope that everything will work out for the best for our students. And that's our goal in terms of our vision.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, then officially we need approval of the agenda as it's outlined. A motion to approve? What?
There's a gentleman wanting, did you sign up?
You already talked.
Oh, you did talk, okay.
No motion to approve the agenda, so we're done tonight? Okay. Joyce? And second, Judy. Any discussions or changes proposed to the agenda? No? All in favor? 6-0. Communications, was that part of your communications? Did I move that up, or you have it?
I think that, I said what it
Yeah,
is.
okay, right. That's just what I'm saying, we rearranged, okay. So we have a presentation, though, of the budget that's right now, Brett and
And
Matt?
Mr. Stevens, yeah.
Yep.
Thank you once again. As I just shared, this is a very hard and difficult process. It's probably one of the most difficult things as a professional that have had to endure. I understand that behind these reductions are people and there's families and there's real life experiences, and again, I think you shared that very well, and I know those people, and I'm inspired by all those people, and I'm hurt by those cuts as well. Our teachers, our staff members, all of our staff members are the heart and soul. They give life to our students, and they breathe passion to bring all their disciplines to life. So I truly understand, and I understand the anxiety and the trepidation about what programs could look and how they could be different as we move along. I'd like to thank our Board of Education. Since the first day that I was fortunate enough and blessed to be the superintendent, they've been talking about future planning and the priority of future planning. Finding a pathway to sustainability is something that we've talked about, and as I entered my third year, I've communicated out in several different forms and several different fashions, and I will continue to do so fervently to make sure that we have exemplar programs, high quality experiences for our students, and then put our staff in positions to be successful. And it hurts right now, and we're not there. Staff deserves this plan, community deserves this plan, but most importantly, our students deserve this plan. And as we move along in April, our District Advisory Council and strategic initiatives will be processed at greater length, and hopefully we'll have more clarity so people could see that even though we're getting through today, we're looking and fiercely defending tomorrow and giving a clear path. This budget has, to me, been about maintaining high-quality programs. That's the Board of Education's expectations, making sure that there's student-centered experiences at the core of every single thing that we do. The whole child mindset is alive and well. It's been a conversation and a very integral part of our future planning. And we've also talked about cost containment, and that's a different approach. I've been here for close to 15 years in cost containment and making sure that We have some policy analysis in place to make sure that we're sustainable for future students. Those students who have not come to our school deserve an incredible, magical Fairport experience, just like our students are receiving. Cost containment by managing class size and declining enrollment. So the budget that we're presenting, I believe, preserves those ideals. Is it perfect? Does it serve everyone's needs? I hope it serves our students' needs. I hope that it puts teachers and staff members alike in positions to give our students the very best experiences. This presentation is an overview of our three-part budget, of our program, administrative, and capital. I'll be sharing information on our expenditures in those realms. Then Mr. Stevens, our Assistant Superintendent for Business, will come in and talk about the revenue, how we actually pay for the expenditures of our district, and some voter propositions. The three-part budget, again, includes our programming, which is our instruction and our transportation and our support services. Our administrative lines, which is all administration, which includes our central office, our principals, our BOCES costs and commitments, and our capital lines, which is our buildings and grounds. The program for budget, this includes salaries, benefits, and supplies. You'll see a 1.4% change from 2017 and 2018. And again, this is all the costs associated with student instruction and support services. And we transport over 5,700 students, public and private and parochial schools alike. It's 75% of our total budget. So this is a major component. You could see that our special ed costs or special programming, which includes our private and public access costs, our BOCES commitments, our special ed programming. Just to highlight, it's a 0.23% increase. Our general instruction, and wherever you do see a negative, that's as a result of reductions, unfortunately. You'll see 11% transportation cost of an increase. We're building a transportation center, and we had to put costs in for shuttling our bus drivers to the transportation facility to get their buses. So that is all aidable and in the project, but we had to make it a part of this budget. Our employee benefits are up 3.5%. A major factor in our budget process is our enrollment. You could see that our enrollment K-5, our incoming projections right now are 370. That number will most likely increase, but we'll also lose some students as well. But it's around 370. You could see how that's looked over the past several years. We're declining at about 2% per year. Expected to flat line around 2025, around 5,300 to 5,400 students, based upon our enrollment projections. And these are all on the website, and I will continue to share these in my communications as well. But you could see the 490 here to 370 there. You could see we have 370 students approximately coming in, and we have 490 going out. And again, with that declining enrollment, that 2% a year, you could see how that's playing out. So even though there were staffing reductions, there were staffing reductions in the name of being accountable and responsible and responsive to declining enrollment. Saying that, our class sizes are highly comparable to our Monroe County counterparts. When I sit around the table and we talk class sizes, these class sizes remain, these are ranges, it's never perfect, but these remain to be comparable to our Monroe County counterparts. And making sure that at the elementary level, especially in that K2 area, we are really protecting the class size. We believe that you have one shot with our elementary students. That is when there are the greatest windows of opportunity to impact how students progress. From a developmental level, from a programmatic level, there are significant differences on how the days are spent at the elementary level. If you take a look at the actual K-5 sections, you'll see, as a result of declining enrollment and slight adjustments to our class sizes, and again, here are our class sizes. When you get in second grade, you're going to be between 20 and 23. Third grade between 20 and 23. Fourth grade between 20 and 23. And fifth grade 22 to 24. Sectioning. We'll see a change in FTE, or full-time equivalents, of minus 7.5. Class sizes continue to be, again, comparable and credible, so we can have productive classes where students and teachers can interact. Students, again, the goal is always that they receive similar opportunities. And we feel that we achieve that. The electives program at the high school is alive and well. There will be instances where there are special accommodations, computer labs, technology, safety, space limitations, call for smaller class sizes, and of course we will be responsive to that. As a whole, and again, this is where it's hard. This isn't just a slide. This is a slide that has a story. And this is a slide that has the emotions that are attached to it, and rightfully so. In order to balance our budget, be responsive to our declining enrollment, 28.25 FTEs were realized. Now, 6 of those will be called back through retirements. 12 will be recalled back in either long-term sub positions or part-time positions. So as we continue to staff and as we continue to learn more about what schedules look like, we'll have exact numbers of what that actually nets out to be. And again, I just reviewed where the total reductions are coming from. Paraprofessionals, the computer TAs, through our special computer TAs were reduced, as was shared earlier this evening. Through our CSE process, other paras were released in the amount of 11 teacher aides through our special ed, or CSE, Committee on Special Education process. Now, saying that, if students need support, we will be responsive to that. We are committed to make sure that the right supports are in place for students. But there's a process for that, and the Committee on Special Education, I have all the confidence that we will be responsible to that, or responsive to that. There was also clerical staff reduced, and in the athletic department, there was some equipment managers that were, we forego those budget lines. Employee benefits. The district's average contribution rate to the ERS will decrease from 15.3% to an estimated 14.9%. This has been an incredible point of advocacy when we meet with our local representatives. These are costs associated with the retirement system. Some would say that it's a cost that we should have some wiggle room, if you will, with a reserve for the TRS, the teacher retirement system, and or making it an exclusion to help with our tax levy. But we have not been successful in our advocacy efforts. But this is just not a Fairport advocacy effort. This is a Monroe County advocacy effort as well. And again, these are all based upon percentage of salaries. And you'll see that the TRS increases from 9.8% of salaries to 10.63% of salaries. These numbers are given to us. Here's the administrative budget. All the costs associated with the administration. Again, that's the central office, principals, our BOCES services, and our directors and our district office staff. It represents 11% of our budget, and you'll see from 2017, 18, and 19, there's a $149,000 change, or 1% change. And if you take a look at the next slide, it sort of line items it and shows you that there was a reduction, $12,000 reduction, or $11,959 reduction with a half-time clerk. Ariel, welcome. Central administration, the business office reassigned duties that resulted in a decrease in a budget line there, and you'll see another reduction. If you see this 5.12% increase, that sort of pops out. The Board of Education, in an effort to extend the use of our reserves and to increase the reliance of our reserves into the general fund and to stop using the reserves to purchase our technology equipment, has increased it by $164,000 in the general fund. And again, that again is another example of how there's a commitment to instructional technology to make sure our students have the right resources and tools to use in our schools and in our classrooms. Employee benefits are at 1.99% increase. And you'll see that there's a minus 1.8% because there was a $90,000 reduction in administrative lines that we cut to balance our budget. Our capital budget, the costs associated with operating our facilities, our bus purchases, our debt service, how we pay our debts from past capital projects. There was a $400,000 transfer from the debt service fund that we'll be seeing as a revenue that will impact our expenditures. Mr. Stevens will be talking about that. But the reason why we did that was our commitment to our taxpayers. We wanted to make sure that we were putting forth a budget that was responsible, that was not, that lessened the tax burden, if you will, and using the debt service fund. A transfer of $400,000 will allow us to do that, to ease the tax burden on our stakeholders or community members. The capital budget represents approximately 12.9% of our total budget. school replacement, our school bus replacement, excuse me. We're going to be hoping to purchase 7 72 passenger buses, 2 65 passenger buses, and 2 28 passenger buses. Of those buses that we're trading in, 9 are over 10 years old. 9 are 11 and 12 years old. And we try to maximize mileage on our buses to make sure that our students have safe and reliable, consistent transportation. You can see that the overall total cost with our cost and our trade-in allowance is $1.2 million. That includes the trade-in allowance. Looking at the line item, we decreased our utility lines. We looked over the years and we were able to reduce that line item by $25,000. You'll see that there's a 7.5% increase in the employee benefits here. Well, our program budget lines and our administrative budget lines here decreased. And as a result, the way the formula works, and Mr. Stevens can really get into this if the board chooses to hear more about it, but it's a proportional relationship. So as those lines decrease, the overall in the employee benefits increased to 7.5%. You'll see the $100,000 project looks to the Brooks Hill Library, to HVAC improvements in that library for the future. And within this line item, you'll see the $400,000 transfer from our capital fund to offset our debt service, which Mr. Stevens will be sharing. So our total expenditures, our program, administrative, and capital, takes an average of, it makes it an average of 1.5% increase from budget to budget. Last year we were at 3.06%, and this year it's a 1.5% increase. Mr. Stevens.
Okay, good evening, and thank you, Mr. Provenzano. Just to kind of recap the proration of the benefits. Overall, the district has, the benefits line, when we talk about the three-part budget, it really has to be allocated across program, admin, and capital. And as you see here, and just looking at program, admin, and capital, with the smaller increases in program and admin is what created that proration of really that increase that you see in the capital budget in terms of benefits. So there's no, additional increase in a benefit in that area. It's simply just the proration of the 3 parts, over the 3 parts. So now we're going to get into talking about the revenues. 2 of the biggest pieces of revenue for the district would be state aid and property tax. We also receive some sales tax from Monroe County, and then our other revenues, charges for services, interest earnings, and then the usage of the reserves and fund balance on the revenue side of the budget. So I'd like to start a little bit with talking about the state budget highlights. The enacted budget that was at the tail end of March. This is the brief summary in terms of how that impacted schools and more specifically to Fairport. So as you take a look, the increase in school formula aids overall is $859 million. How that's broken out would be an increase to the foundation aid, which is the general operating aid that school districts receive for programs, and $241 million increase to expense-based aids. The foundation aid, how that flowed to Fairport, was approximately $449,000 of an increase. And the expense-based aids, which are transportation, BOCES, building aid, are, as Mr. Provenzano mentioned earlier, our aid on special education costs for high needs, for both BOCES placements, internal placements in the district, as well as some private placements. That would be our excess cost aid. those aids are really meant to flow based on what we spend in 2017-18, and the aid will be received in the following school year. So our estimated increase in overall is a net $132,000 for the expense-based aids. A couple other things that will school district be required to do, or some things within the state budget, is that school level funding plans will be required. So we'll have to submit data to state ed and the Department of Budget. They are developing that form for districts to fill out, but essentially how funds are allocated across buildings. So we have a slew of account codes that we have to report by on the chart of accounts, and that'll be broken out by building. So that'll be a new thing for districts to have to report on for in future years. And then a couple of hot items were the proposal for capping building and transportation and BOCES aids. The enacted budget does not cap those in future years, and the reimbursement rate for our summer special ed programs that we operate in schools. There'll be no change to the reimbursement rate for that. So state aid revenue, again, foundation aid is the largest portion, and that's for our general operating expenses. You can see the change of $449,000. Below that, you see gap elimination adjustment. It's just there simply as a reminder that there used to be a gap elimination adjustment. That was money taken away from schools for the state to balance its budget. So that's no longer being taken away from schools. But in essence, it shorted the district the foundation aid in previous years. And as that was restored over the years, districts received larger increases in revenue simply because the aid was being restored, not because we were receiving more foundation aid, but the aid was being restored. Now that we're seeing the modest increases, or the smaller increases in foundation aid, it certainly is a different impact to the revenue side of the budget. So overall, about $581,000 in state aid, or 1.45% change. So here's a look at the history of the gap elimination adjustment. So the negative reflects how much money was taken away in each year. And you can see in 16-17, 0, which meant that essentially the district received that $3.2 million shot in that 1 year, which is very large compared to this year's $600,000 increase and next year's $450,000 increase. So over $33 million was taken away from schools, of which it's likely that we'll never see the likes of that money in the future. So here's a brief history of state aid. Again, $40.6 million projected for 18-19. BOCES aid has fluctuated a little bit over the years. And as Brett mentioned, with regard to the tech reserve, there's been a commitment to ease reliance off the tech reserve. So in 15-16, $1 million was approved to be spent. 16-17, 1.4. We had a slight decrease in that in 17-18 as we looked to balance the budget for the 17-18 school year. And the proposed $636,000 out of the tech reserve for 2018-19. Now combined with the $164,000 increase in the general fund, that's a total spending to generate BOCES aid of $900,000, just about $100,000 less than current year, which again will help ease off of the reliance of the reserve as we look forward into future years. So the aid being generated from such purchases are being used to increase the general fund expense and then continue the reserve, but lessen that over the next few years. So next we'll talk about the property tax levy limit, commonly known as 2%. There's a formula that districts have to calculate, in terms of the guidance been provided by the state, which will essentially could lead to a tax cap that is more or less than 2%, depending on the factors within the formula. Here's a breakdown of the school's formula. So you start with a prior year tax levy, and then the tax-based growth factor, which is based on Town of Barrington. That's information that comes from Office of Real Property Tax Services. And we add in pilots, which are payments in lieu of taxes from the previous year, of which you can see down below are subtracted out for the projections for next year. The allowable levy growth factor, that is the 2% that's commonly referred to. Now it's capped at 2%. So this year CPI was 2.13%. Being capped at 2% meant that the multiplier is 2%, not 2.13. In years past, that number has been as low as 0.12%, which again would generate a much smaller tax levy limit in that case. And then we're able to add in the exclusions. So you can see in the previous year, we decreased the exclusions that were in current year, and then the following year we add those capital exclusions back. So what that means is that's the local share of debt and our capital purchases, such as buses. So buses are one thing that flow through this formula, and in essence allow the tax levy limit to be slightly higher. So that would be the local share of previously approved capital projects. It would be the debt. If you remember, there's $6.9 million on the previous slide in the transfer to debt service fund. So it's that debt, less the building aid and transportation aid for the buses as well that are coming in to net at the $1.9 million. So without that, so if we were to talk about this tax levy limit and say we didn't have that exclusion, we actually would not be able to increase the tax levy much more than $500,000 without that $1.9 million exclusion. So overall, it's $75.3 million in tax levy limit. So here's a summary of the property taxes in the district, and the pilots, or payments in lieu of taxes, is a piece of revenue we receive, and those would be anything that's been negotiated through the County of Monroe Industrial Development Agency. The village has an industrial development agency, so that's new construction of which property was assessed typically at a land value that hasn't been utilized, and then once a pilot agreement is negotiated, the district will receive a portion of the taxes over the course of typically 10 years, and then it goes to full assessed value. So total property taxes is 3.1%. As mentioned before, in the tax levy limit, 3.21% is the limit, so the district's tax cap is tax cap compliant. So our overall revenue, again, state aid and property taxes we talked about before, pilots slightly down, sales tax and other, so that would be primarily that's our sales tax, about a little over $5.4 million a year budgeted of sales tax that district receives from the county. Our federal Medicaid, the assigned appropriated fund balance, and the assigned reserves. I'm just going to draw your attention to those two, because as you look at those, that reflects the commitment from a long-term standpoint of the district and board to ease reliance off of reserves and not rely on having a assigned fund balance or surplus at the end of each year to fund the following year's budget. So, and then the assigned reserves would be related to our employee retirement system to try to decrease reliance on such reserve each year into the future. So that has a relationship as the revenue side of the budget sees a decrease in terms of balancing it on the expense side of the budget as well. And then our transfer from debt service fund, the $400,000, being transferred from the debt service fund, again, to bring the local share down. So the $1.9 million that you see here has already been brought down by $400,000 to help out with keeping the tax levy, and to mitigate the tax levy increase. So summary in terms of how we balance the budget after revenues with fund balance and reserves. So we start with a total budget of $129 million. The total revenues, so those pieces would exclude the transfer from debt service fund, the assigned fund balance, and the reserve usage. So total revenues is projected at $123.3 million. And then adding in the transfer from the debt service fund, as well as the assigned fund balance and reserves of $5.2 million, brings us to the reserve and the revenue plus reserves and fund balance of the expense side of the budget, or $129 million. Now you can see on the bottom, in terms of a percent of budget, that the decline in usage percentage of the assigned fund balance and reserves reflects looking forward to future budgets and balancing the needs from reserves and fund balance. And here's a breakdown of what it looks like in terms of the assigned fund balance reserves. The assigned fund balance, 3.9 million. Again, that is surplus funds in the 2017-18 budget being used to balance the revenue side or keep, the tax, help out any tax increases or reductions in 2018-19. And then the reserves are broken up of the tax certiorari reserve, budgeting $20,000. That's to pay for any tax cert claims or tax refunds that take place typically in the fall of each school year. The unemployment reserve would help pay any costs related to the district's obligation to the state unemployment fund. And the retirement contribution reserve can solely pay expenses related to the employee retirement system. So as a percent change in terms of the tax rate, it's important to pay attention. I'm also a Fairport resident, so I've received my letter from the town, but it's important to pay attention that what we utilize in projecting next year's tax rate increase would be the current assessments, because assessments don't become final until the summer. So they can change from now until August in terms of what the final assessment roll will be. With assessments, if there is an increase in assessed value, then typically what that does to the rate is lowers the increase in the rate. So we'll see on a future slide that the tax levy in most years has been higher than the tax rate. And I believe a couple of years ago there was even a negative change in the tax rate. So if you're like me and looked at your bill, you'd see you'd had a decrease in taxes in that particular year. So again, there's a town-wide reassessment taking place. It was last performed in 2010 for the assessed values, total assessed values. So again, here's a historical look at the budget, tax levy, and tax rate. And as mentioned, as you see, the tax levy has typically been higher than the tax rate increase. In 16-17 was a year that we had a 1.49% tax levy increase, but actually a decrease in the tax rate. And we update this each year as we present and with future budgets to place the correct tax rate once the tax rate's set in the fall. A couple of propositions in addition to the budget vote and candidates would be the capital technology reserve expense. This is, again, related to spending money on technology through BOCES out of the tech reserve of $736,000. As we see that over time, it's intended to ease reliance off of this reserve as it's being spent down over the years. It's been approved. $2.5 million was my first year here, and about 4 years ago we had 1.4 million $1 million, and now 736. So it has declined over the years in terms of that reserve spending. And then another piece required by school districts for voters would be, in order to fund any type of capital reserve, it must be approved to be established. So capital reserves have typically a 10-year life cycle, when they're first approved, depending on the approval, 10 or 15 years. And ours has been both utilized and exhausted. So we've used a little over $8 million over the past two capital projects, $5.4 million on the primarily the roofing project as well as the renovations at the high school, and then $3.2 million for the transportation facility project. So again, those are capital projects that are approved by voters, are outside of the general fund dollars in terms of the revenue that we would see, and we'd receive building aid on those projects in future years. If the projects aren't taking place, there's no building aid flowing in for those projects. So just to kind of highlight a piece of that. So when we talked about the transportation, the project was 11.2. The voters authorized 3.2 million to come from the reserve, essentially to try to keep the tax impact at a zero local share after the use of the reserve. So in order for the district to try to offset future costs for capital projects, there would be a need for a reserve to actually be able to fund. Otherwise, any future projects would be strictly local share on the tax levy increase. Upcoming events, We have the public hearing on May 1st, which is 2 weeks prior to our vote, and then the budget vote and board elections from 6 to 9 at Joanna Perrin Middle School on the 15th. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt and Brett. We didn't ask any questions going along. Are there any questions or for them? A budget, Matt, right, is it's a plan. It gives us the upper limit. We don't have to spend 100% of those dollars. Is that right?
Correct. It's an upper limit.
We can't
Districts
go
may
over
not
it.
exceed that
No,
amount.
no. It's a not to exceed
Not to
amount.
exceed. Correct.
Could I ask one quick question, Matt? If we were not to reduce the reliance on reserves, what would be the outcome of that?
If we decided not to use the reduced reliance on the reserve of $500,000 of VRS, in terms of changes within the budget, I think that would be a discussion. You know,
What would do the longevity of that line? I think it was 2021, 22.
Oh, it's extended, in terms of reducing the reliance, it extends those reserves to future years so that they're, you know, in terms of, I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question in terms of what you were looking for. Reducing the reliance on the reserves pushes the reserves out, you know, a couple more years before, you know, those reserves are projected to be used at the current usage rate. So if we continue to use the reserves at, you know, $1.8 million a year versus $1.3 million, then those reserves run out at a sooner date. And I believe it was 2020, 21 initially, and those have been extended out approximately to 22, 23 in terms of future years.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I don't, if I may jump in, I don't think that could be underscored enough. And that was what we learned through our district advisory council, this concept of sustainability, making sure that, you know, future generations can experience high-quality programming, facilities, making sure that we have a plan in place that is responsive to the needs of our students and our community, and expectations of them too. And we learned that through our process, that you know, that is an expectation of the community, is to be able to invest in our schools and to keep growing with the years.
Okay. Sorry, I have a thought, and I truly believe, I hope you'll forgive me, everybody, and no surprises overall, but there was one thing that just kind of stuck out going through there. And I asked a question about the do not exceed, if putting our heads together even after approving of the budget, if there's something we can do on that transportation line. That was a huge increase that gives us, that we need to do. We can't, there's no parking once we start that transportation site, right? And I understand we need to do that, and so I'm not asking to rehash unless there's some different way of doing it without costing us $611,000 more. So that we, and I know the math, and I'm not asking you to explain it, right? I'm just saying, after we approve a budget, if there's a way that we can still think even creatively about how we get our bus drivers there that doesn't cost us $600,000 more. And I know it'd just be 1 year, year and a half, however long that construction project's gonna last.
Yeah, it's just 1 year, but just, I know it's a $611,000 increase. But of that, it's approximately $300,000 to $400,000 that really is the impact to that
Okay, right.
piece of it.
So it
Yeah,
would've gone up 300,000 anyway, the transportation line.
Yeah, usually
300,000
about 200,000 to three. Yep.
Shuttling people back and forth.
Yes.
So I don't know, I know we've talked about it before, and that's what we've come up with. If there's anything else comes out, then that's one of the areas we can possibly look at, right? Is, and I'm open to anybody's ideas. Thanks, sorry, I know that's a surprise, but it just stuck out to me when we looked down all the increases, that one was quite significant. Of the $2 million, that's, 25% of it. No, I guess only 12% for the shuttling. Thank you, thanks. So, moving on the agenda, board discussion action items, approval of the 2018-19 school budget as has been presented, and need a motion for approval. Maureen, second. Kevin, Any further discussions? Perhaps my comment should have come there instead.
Yeah, I would just add to that, I like the point that you're making about that being the upper limit, and that there can be still movement with, not exceeding that limit. So on behalf of the many people who tonight came to share their vision and aspiration about instruction, I would say keep sharing, and be part of that vision. Please don't feel that you're excluded from it, because our kids are the most important thing. That quality instruction is the most important thing, so your voices are important.
Thank you in a roundabout way. I guess that's why I was asking it, right? Is an upper limit, and we can still make adjustments to the degree that it makes sense and still stays within, like you say, the vision. The vision is what's put together by hearing from everybody. You said it well, Brett, at the beginning of our long-term plan, the smartest people in the room is all of us, so it's not one person in this room. Okay, other discussions on the budget? So approval of the budget as was presented. All in favor? 6-0. And then the property tax report card. Need a motion to approve the property tax report card. Marty, I'm sorry, not Maureen. One of those M's. Judy, second. Any questions about the report card? That's to be submitted when?
Tomorrow,
Tomorrow.
within 24 hours after board adoption.
Okay.
Yes, that's,
Any questions from that document? All in favor? 6-0. Okay, we have a resolution here relative, if you read it, I'm not going to read it all, right, but to some HVAC, heating, ventilation, right, at Brooks Hill. Well, let me get the motion to approve first, and we'll talk about it more. Motion to approve this resolution? Joyce, second. Kevin? Okay, can you?
yeah, this is we're required in any capital work to, the board's required to adopt a seeker resolution, and discussing with council, and looking at the work of the Brooks Hill Library, just simply renovation of the HVAC system within the library. So very similar to the work that's taking place at Martha Brown this year with regards to that. That was approved a couple years ago.
All right, so the HVAC system of the library requires a seeker resolution type thing,
It does.
which is environmental, basically,
It's-
impact. right?
Yes, yep. Mhm.
Okay. Seems a little odd for such a small, relatively to the building, right? But, what's that?
Cross those Ts, dot those
Yes.
Is.
Well, thank you for always crossing the Ts and dotting the Is. I just didn't expect that for that repair job. Okay, any other questions? All in favor? 6-0. The BOCES #1 annual election administrative budget vote is happening tonight. Is that right? Our vote is that, and as we vote, I believe our clerk will fill out the paperwork and sign that right at the end. So we have to do this individually. We can't do all these votes together. Is that right? Okay.
Just in case somebody wants to recuse herself.
So seat #1, up for election is Robert Dixon of West Arundecoy Central School District. A motion to, I guess, approve or vote, select him. Maureen. Second. Joyce. All in favor? 6-0. Seat #2, Thomas Nespeka from Webster Central School District. Motion to approve. Kevin. Second. Judy. All in favor? Seat #3, surprising name, Maureen Knupp from the Fairport Central School District. There we go, we got even some cheering, great. Kevin. Second. Judy. All in favor? Abstaining?
Abstain.
Right, so 5-0 and 1 abstention. Seat #4, Sora Sachs, did I say that right, from Brighton
Yes.
Central School District. Motion to approve, Joyce. Maureen, second. All in favor? 6-0. Seat #5, Nancy Samal from East Arundecoy Central School District. Motion to approve. Marty's your hand up? Marty and Judy, second. All in favor?
I'll finally learn the difference between East Arundecoit and West Arundecoit.
6-0.
It's always a surprising thing for me.
The border. And then number 6 here is not for a seat, but the administrative budget, the portion of which is $5.6 million. Need a motion to approve that portion of the BOCES, number 1 BOCES budget. Maureen? Second. Kevin? Any questions about that? Don't know if we have the people here to answer it, which we've had the documents for a little while, right, since March. Okay, all in favor? 6-0. And that brought us to the end of our overall, just any board comments?
Well, I'd like to suggest that if anyone wants to run for Board of Education next year, there's a meeting where they could find out that what they're proposing was illegal, but it would not make any sense for me to say that since that gentleman's not here right now. But that's just what I would have suggested.
Yes.
So no comment from me.
Glad you didn't make any comments. Any other no comments, or? Very good, then need a motion to adjourn. Marty? Second, Joyce? All in favor? 6-0. Thank you, everybody. We will see you next Tuesday.